All right. Anxiety in fighters. I recently saw an article on Pat Curran and how he nearly walked away from the sport from anxiety and depression. I also saw War Machine on the Joe Rogan podcast, basically talking about his anxiety and panic attacks. I suffer from generalized anxiety disorder, have been suffering with it for over a year now. Last year, I couldn't leave my house and had an ambulance called out a few times due to legit feelings of anxiety resembling a heart attack. My question is, how do these fighters with anxiety issues get into the cage and fight? As soon as my heart starts racing to the slightest, I think I'm dying. How do all these fighters control their nerves before a fight, especially the ones with anxiety disorders? Thoughts on this, please? Well, to some extent, they don't, right? Let's recall the situation with Karo Parisyan. And by the way, I've had panic attacks too, not quite to the degree that you experienced them. I never had to have an ambulance called or anything like that, but I've certainly been in places where I was in a public place with friends. I just left. I couldn't take the stress and panic anymore. That was been a few years, but I know what you're talking about. It's a real thing. If you've never experienced it, it sounds like you're like, oh, you're just socially awkward. No, it's totally different than that. It's a moment of legit, if I don't get out of here, something horrible is going to happen kind of thing. And Karo Parisyan had those nerves as well, right? I mean, his career was in large part derailed because of it. Not solely because of it, but I mean, it played a pretty significant role. It's hard to think of the decline of Karo Parisyan without those things, right? I mean, the hamstring injury wasn't great either, but you get the idea. So how do they deal with it? Many ways they don't. In many ways they're very tough guys. They're used to battling their own brain, right? They're used to if you're a professional athlete, and you can be any kind of professional athlete. You can be a track runner, you can be an arm wrestler, you can be a judoka, you can be an NBA basketball player, right? And especially if you're a good one who makes it to the playoffs and so forth. You are constantly, to get your body right, to get your game right, to get your mind focused on competition, and to achieve the goals you set out for yourself, you're constantly having to battle your brain. And you see it in combat sports all the time. Your brain, when you're tired, tells you to stop. Oh, stop, don't keep going, stop, stop, stop. And I mentioned this before. If you're hurt, your brain tells you it's pain because it wants you to either stop the pain or address it or do something. These are real things, and it's the guys who can push past that in addition to building all these other skills. But part of the way you're able to get past it is to break your own threshold, your own tolerance, by telling your brain to shut up. So I think in large part, these guys are able to deal with it by relying on that, but it only goes so far. I mean, at some point, your brain's going to win, particularly if the illness is serious enough. So I don't know that they do handle it well, but I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. Fighting, man, is a terrifying thing. I'm attracted to violence because it terrifies me, right? It's like regulated violence is a bit of a different thing. I mentioned this before as well. To me, regulated violence, what we watch in combat sports, or even to a lesser degree wrestling and say jiu-jitsu, or there's arm breaking and choking people out, right? So it's can be unsightly, depending on how your perspective is. But I like it because it's regulated, right? It's like going on a roller coaster. You're going up and down at tremendous paces, and you're getting hung upside down maybe, and all kinds of different feats of gravity. But you're strapped in. These are tested materials. The roller coaster industry is tightly regulated. Engineers built this thing, so it's the sensation, the thrill, without going too far. It's a very different thing than felony fights or street fights or whatever the case may be. So it's a terrifying thing. It's a totally terrifying thing, and I think these guys, in addition to having the fight itself be terrifying and the anticipation of what could happen to them, they have goals they want to achieve. They've got, they might be broke. They might be all kinds of different sort of pressures converge in moments of competition like that, and I'm shocked it doesn't happen more often. I don't know how. I don't mind competing on terms where I know I feel I have some confidence. Like when it comes to MMA journalism, and in the sense that we're building a site, from scratch, I'm willing to go toe-to-toe with anybody in the industry, because I feel like I can compete there. But I don't know how some of these guys compete, all the time, squaring up, even in pure jiu-jitsu or wrestling or Muay Thai, or, you see these guys from the Lumpini and Rajadamnern stadiums, they've got 200 fights. Like, how do you do that? That's an insane amount of pressure to deal with. So, anyway,